Desmond Oba wasn't just rich, he was unimaginably wealthy, a name whispered in business circles and worshipped on magazine covers. Mansions sprawled across cities, luxury cars that sparkled like moving art, and a bank account so vast it felt unreal. From the outside, his life looked perfect. People envied him, admired him, even wanted to be him. But when the laughter faded and the nights grew quiet, Desmond sat alone, surrounded by everything money could buy and aching for the one thing it never could: love. Not the fake kind, not the kind that came with flirtatious smiles at lavish galas or honeyed words in designer dresses. Desmond had seen those women, dated them, even thought he loved one or two of them. But time and time again the truth was brutal. They didn't want him. They wanted his wealth, his power, his last name. And every time a woman's eyes lit up more for the champagne than for his presence, another piece of Desmond's hope cracked. So one night, as rain tapped gently against the glass walls of his massive penthouse, Desmond made a decision, a wild one, a desperate one. He would disappear from the spotlight, the fame, and the fortune. For once, he would strip it all away. No suits, no chauffeurs, no billion-dollar name. Just a man, a stranger behind the wheel. He would become a taxi driver. The idea felt ridiculous at first, almost laughable, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. A taxi driver was invisible in the city. People entered, gave directions, maybe made small talk, and left. No one looked twice, no one cared who was driving, and maybe, just maybe, someone would love him like that. Without the mask, without the money. By morning, Desmond had already taken the first step. He bought an old beat-up taxi, rusted at the edges, squeaking at every turn. It was perfect. Next, he traded his designer wardrobe for thrift store basics. Faded jeans, scuffed shoes, a plain t-shirt, just enough to blend in. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wanted to vanish. As he looked at himself in the rearview mirror that first day, Desmond didn't see a billionaire anymore. He saw a man on a mission. A man who had been loved for the wrong reasons too many times. A man chasing something real. It was the beginning of a story that would take him places he never expected, through betrayal, heartbreak, sacrifice, and maybe, just maybe, something beautiful at the end of it all. But for now, Desmond turned the key in the ignition, the engine coughing to life. And so began the greatest gamble of his life. Not in stocks or business deals, but in love. The morning was warm and buzzing with life when Desmond stepped out into the streets. No longer a billionaire, but a man in disguise. Gone were his sleek suits and polished shoes. In their place, old sneakers, a faded cap, and a jacket that smelled faintly of motor oil. It felt strange, surreal even, to walk through the city without heads turning his way. And yet, that anonymity, it was exactly what he longed for. His taxi was a creaky, aging machine with chipped paint and a stubborn engine, but to Desmond, it was perfect. It hid who he was. Behind that wheel, he wasn't Desmond Oba the mogul. He was just another driver in a sea of forgotten faces. The first few days brought an unexpected thrill. He met strangers from all walks of life, some kind, others rude, many indifferent. He heard pieces of stories, heartbreaks, dreams, disappointments. Most passengers didn't notice him, and Desmond learned something. Taxi drivers were invisible, but they saw everything. One woman, Amina, stood out. She was beautiful and kind, or so it seemed. She laughed at his jokes, asked about his day. For a moment, Desmond thought she might be different. But then came the subtle requests. A little help with rent, a favor for her sick brother, a broken phone. Desmond helped, cautiously. But it didn't take long for him to realize. She didn't love him. She loved what she thought he had. That night, Desmond sat alone in his tiny rented room, disheartened. Even dressed in rags, people still reached for his pockets. Was his plan foolish? Would he ever be seen for who he truly was? Yet, something inside him wouldn't give up. He wasn't done searching. The right person was still out there, someone who would look at the man, not the money. And so he kept driving. It was late afternoon when Desmond saw her. The sky was dimming into soft amber, and a hush seemed to fall over the world. She stood at the corner, not waving frantically like others, but simply waiting, peaceful, composed, as if the chaos around her didn't exist. She was different. Her name was Blessing. She stepped into the cab with quiet grace, no flashy clothes, no heavy makeup, just tired eyes and a calm voice. She didn't ask Desmond for anything, not directions, not explanations. Instead, she asked him about his day, about what it was like to drive a taxi, and she listened, really listened, as if his words mattered. Desmond wasn't used to that. For the first time since he started this charade, he felt seen, not as a billionaire or even as a taxi driver, but as a man. Her presence filled the cab with a silence that wasn't awkward, but comforting. When they reached her destination, she paid her fare without hesitation, smiled, and stepped out with a soft, "Thank you." That night, Desmond couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about her, about the way her eyes softened when she smiled, about how she spoke like someone who had weathered storms but never let them change her soul. He didn't know her story, but something told him it was worth knowing. Days passed. Desmond drove the same streets again and again, hoping to see her, and then, like a whisper answering a prayer, there she was, walking to work in the morning sun. He pulled up beside her and offered a ride. She smiled and without hesitation got in. From that day on, Blessing became a part of Desmond's everyday world. He picked her up for work, for errands, for quiet drives through the city. They talked. Really talked. About family, dreams, struggles. She told him about working hard to support her siblings, about losing her parents young, about being content with the little she had. And Desmond listened, not out of politeness, but because he wanted to. Every word was a window into her life, every glance a new layer to her quiet strength. She didn't ask him for anything, never once hinted at wanting more. And that's when he knew Blessing wasn't like the others. She was real. And slowly, cautiously, Desmond began to hope again. Hope that maybe, just maybe, love could grow from the ashes of disappointment. Not the love built on wealth or expectations, but something rooted in truth, something worth holding on to. Desmond couldn't ignore what was happening inside him. Blessing had taken root in places even he thought were dead. Each moment spent together, each glance, each word felt like a healing balm. But beneath that hope was fear. The fear of history repeating itself. What if she found out who he really was and everything changed? So Desmond decided to test her. One quiet afternoon, while driving her home, he sighed and spoke with hesitation. "It's not easy being a taxi driver," he said. "Some days I wonder if I'll ever make enough to survive." Blessing turned to him, her gaze gentle. "Money isn't everything," she replied softly. "Kindness, honesty, that's what matters." Her words landed like a whisper and thunder all at once. Desmond felt something crack open inside him. It wasn't just relief, it was overwhelming emotion. In a world that had judged him for his wealth, here was someone who valued the very things money couldn't buy. And so, he made another decision. It was time to tell her the truth. A few days later, he invited her to meet him at a small, quiet park. The air was heavy with the scent of blooming jasmine. Desmond was nervous, more nervous than he'd ever been in business negotiations worth millions. When Blessing arrived, he asked her to sit, took a deep breath, and told her everything. That he wasn't a real taxi driver. That he was, in fact, one of the richest men in the city. That everything she knew about him had been part of a plan, not to deceive her, but to protect himself. When he finished, he held his breath. Blessing was quiet, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she smiled. "I didn't fall in love with a billionaire," she said. "I fell in love with the man behind the wheel." Desmond's heart soared. In that moment, the weight of the lie he'd carried finally lifted. He had found her. The one who loved him not for what he had, but for who he was. Desmond had never felt lighter. With the truth out and Blessing still by his side, he believed nothing could shake them. But there was one final test, the kind that couldn't be solved with honesty or hope. His family. For years, Desmond's parents had lived in a world of status and perfection. His mother, elegant and poised, his father, a stern businessman obsessed with legacy. Introducing Blessing to them was more than just a formality, it was a storm waiting to happen. Still, Desmond believed love could bridge the divide. One Sunday afternoon, he took Blessing to the family estate. The mansion sat like a silent judge behind its gates. Grand, imposing, cold. Blessing wore her simplest dress. She held Desmond's hand tightly, her palms damp with nerves, but her head held high. Inside, Mr. and Mrs. Oba waited. Their smiles faltered the moment they saw her. Desmond introduced her with pride, telling them how she had stood by him when he was nothing, how she had seen the man, not the money. But silence filled the room. Then came the words, sharp and calm like knives hidden in velvet. "She is not from our world," Mrs. Oba said. "She doesn't belong here," Mr. Oba added. Desmond felt his heart crack. He fought back, spoke of her kindness, her strength, her loyalty, but none of it mattered. All his parents saw was a poor girl from a forgotten corner of the city. "Love is not enough," his mother said. "Marriage is about family, status, the future." Blessing sat still, silent, but her eyes betrayed the hurt. She had never asked to be judged, never claimed to be someone she wasn't. Desmond stood. "Then I choose her," he said, and he walked out. With Blessing. Behind him, his parents called his name, but Desmond didn't look back. Some walls weren't meant to be climbed. Some were meant to be walked away from. The air outside the mansion felt heavier than ever. Desmond and Blessing walked hand in hand, but silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Behind them they had left behind wealth, legacy, and the cold approval of a family that measured love by lineage. Desmond had chosen her, but with that choice came consequences neither of them could yet see. They moved into a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It was nothing like the grandeur Desmond was used to. No chandeliers, no fountains humming in the courtyard, just cracked tiles, a humming refrigerator, and the sound of neighbors arguing through thin walls. But Blessing made it feel like home. She cooked simple meals, laughed at his clumsy attempts to fix the leaky sink, lit a candle by the window each night and prayed for strength. Desmond, once the man who managed empires, now took odd jobs fixing cars and delivering goods. The work was hard, the pay humble, but he never complained. Yet over time, a quiet shadow crept into their home. Blessing saw it first in Desmond's eyes, the weight he tried to hide, the way he lingered too long on bills, the way his smile faltered when she told him she needed to buy medicine for her younger brother. He never said a word, but she saw it. The guilt, the struggle. One night, as rain danced on the tin roof above them, Blessing reached across the small table and took Desmond's hand. "You gave up everything for me," she whispered. "I never wanted that." Desmond looked up, startled. "I gave up what didn't matter," he said. "What matters is you." She smiled softly, but her eyes held sorrow. "But it does matter, Desmond. I see the way you carry the weight, and I can't be the reason you lose yourself." That conversation echoed through the days that followed. Though they loved each other deeply, their world had shrunk into survival. Desmond began to question, was love enough to keep them afloat in a sea of bills and missed opportunities? Blessing, too, wrestled with guilt. Her love had cost him a kingdom. One sleepless night, She whispered into the dark, "Maybe love needs more than just hearts. Maybe it needs air and space and peace." They didn't speak of it again, but both felt it, the growing ache of a dream crumbling under reality. Then came the letter. Hand-delivered by a man in a tailored suit, it bore the family crest Desmond had once walked away from. It was from his father. "If you come home," it read, "the door is open, but only if you return alone." Desmond stared at the words for a long time. He felt the old rage rise, but also something else. Temptation. Not for the wealth, but for the chance to give Blessing more. To offer her a life without strain. He didn't show her the letter. Instead, he folded it up and placed it in the drawer beside their bed. But deep down, a decision was beginning to form. One that would break hearts, shift futures, and test whether love truly could survive the cost of choosing it. Desmond didn't sleep that night. He sat in the quiet corner of Blessing's hospital room, watching his children sleep. Every breath they took, every tiny twitch of their fingers, felt like a miracle he didn't deserve. But now that he had them, he wasn't letting go. By morning, his decision was clear. He was going to confront his father. Not to ask, not to negotiate, but to reclaim his life. That afternoon, Desmond returned to the mansion not as the obedient son, but as a man with nothing left to lose. He stormed into his father's study without knocking. Mr. Oba looked up from a glass of brandy, startled by the fire in his son's eyes. "I'm done living a life that isn't mine," Desmond said. Mr. Oba narrowed his gaze. "You've been with that girl again, haven't you?" "They're not just that girl anymore," Desmond growled. "She's the mother of my children, your grandchildren." Silence, then a slow blink of disbelief. "You're lying." "I held them in my arms yesterday," Desmond replied. "A boy and a girl, they carry your blood, and you'll never meet them if you think you can control me again." Mr. Oba slammed the glass down. "You think you can just throw everything away for some street girl with babies?" "I already did," Desmond said coldly, "and it was the best decision I ever made." "Do you realize what you're risking? The company, the legacy?" "I don't want your empire if it means living like a prisoner." The words sliced through the room. Mrs. Oba had entered quietly during the argument. Now she stepped forward. "Desmond's right," she said, her voice firm. "We tried to build a family on image, on power, and look what it cost us." Mr. Oba turned to her, stunned. "You knew?" "I've known for weeks," she said, "and I've never been more proud of our son." Desmond stepped forward. "I'm leaving, Father. Not running away, just choosing differently. And if you ever want to be part of your grandchildren's lives, you'll come to me on my terms." Without waiting for a response, Desmond turned and walked out. He returned to the hospital with a sense of freedom he hadn't felt in years. Blessing was sitting up, holding their daughter. When she saw him, her face lit up. "What happened?" she asked. Desmond knelt beside her. "I broke the chains," he said, "and I'm never going back." Blessing leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. The babies stirred gently, as if sensing the peace settling into the room. This time, Desmond wasn't choosing love instead of his life. He was building a life around love, and nothing, not money, not legacy, not even blood, would ever pull them apart again. The wedding was everything the Oba family had dreamed of. Lavish, opulent, dripping in gold and silk. The ballroom glistened with crystal chandeliers. The guests were politicians, celebrities, and the most powerful business moguls in the country. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and smiles were painted onto faces like masks. But Desmond felt nothing. Standing beside Evelyn, he moved like a puppet, going through the motions. The vows were empty words, the kiss a performance. And while the crowd erupted in applause, his heart remained buried in the ashes of a goodbye that still echoed in his soul. He was now a husband in name only, married not for love, but for business, for alliances, for control. Evelyn, on the other hand, basked in the spotlight. She twirled in designer gowns, threw lavish brunches, posed for society magazines. To her, the mansion was paradise. But to Desmond, it was a gilded cage. He tried to find meaning in routine, returning to the family company, attending board meetings, hosting formal dinners. But every night when he returned to the massive bedroom he shared with Evelyn, a void stared back at him. Evelyn quickly revealed her true colors. She was demanding, careless, entitled. She had no interest in Desmond's thoughts, only in his image. She surrounded herself with flatterers, spent fortunes on things she never used, and scoffed at Desmond's rare attempts at real conversation. At first, Desmond stayed silent, but as the days bled into weeks, his patience wore thin. He became colder, distant. He avoided her whenever he could, retreating into his study or taking long drives late into the night. The mansion, though grand, felt lifeless. Evelyn noticed, of course. She confronted him one evening, her voice sharp. "You barely touch me. You don't talk to me. Why did you even marry me?" Desmond's reply was quiet but brutal. "Because I was told to. Because it was the price I had to pay to protect someone I actually loved." Evelyn's face paled. The truth shattered whatever illusion she had held on to. From that night forward, their marriage became a cold war. They lived under the same roof, but in separate worlds. Evelyn escaped into her lifestyle, Desmond into his silence. Meanwhile, far from the glimmering halls, Blessing lived with quiet strength. She had started over, found a small job at a local shop, kept her head down. She told no one about Desmond, not even when she began to feel the changes in her body, the missed periods, the sudden nausea. Blessing was pregnant, with Desmond's child, and yet, she told no one, not because she didn't want to, but because she knew he had already sacrificed everything for her once. She couldn't ask him to do it again. Instead, she braced herself for motherhood alone, even as her heart ached for a man she could no longer claim. Desmond, trapped in luxury, had no idea that the very life he thought he had destroyed was about to bloom again without him, and the cracks in his perfect world were only just beginning to show. Blessing's belly grew with each passing week, a quiet miracle hidden beneath loose dresses and silent prayers. She still went to work, still smiled politely at customers, still lived as if her world hadn't been turned upside down. But inside, everything had changed. She no longer cried at night. The tears had dried, replaced by resolve. If she couldn't have Desmond, she would still give his child the life they deserved. Even if it meant facing the world alone. She saved every coin, ate less so her savings would stretch, walked to work instead of taking the bus. Her body ached, her energy faded, but she endured it all with grace. There were moments, quiet, cruel ones, when doubt crept in. Could she really do this without him? Could love still exist in the absence of presence? But then the baby would kick and all her fears melted into a quiet warmth. Meanwhile, in the mansion that glistened like a golden tomb, Desmond unraveled. He drank more, slept less, stared at walls that once impressed him but now only mocked him. Evelyn was a ghost that haunted the same halls. They no longer argued, they simply existed beside each other, strangers in luxury. One afternoon, he walked into his old room, the one he'd used before marriage, and opened a drawer. Inside, beneath a forgotten sweater, he found an old photo. Him and Blessing smiling on a cloudy day by the roadside. She wore that simple blue scarf. He remembered how the wind had caught it and how she had laughed. That laugh haunted him now. He drove that night, no destination, just the city lights, the blur of movement, the sound of the engine humming like a memory. He passed by the street where they used to meet, the cafe where she once said she loved the smell of rain, and he broke. Desmond pulled over and buried his face in his hands. All this wealth, all this status, and yet he had never felt poorer. He had traded real love for empty promises. And the worst part? He didn't even know if she was okay, but someone else did. One rainy evening, Desmond's mother, Mrs. Oba, decided to visit the local market alone, a rare escape from the suffocating world she had built. As she browsed fresh produce, her eyes caught a familiar face, Blessing. But she wasn't alone. She was visibly pregnant, tired, worn. Her clothes hung loosely around her, her hands clutched a small bag of vegetables. Mrs. Oba stood frozen. When their eyes met, Blessing's face went pale. She looked for an exit, but Mrs. Oba approached gently. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Mrs. Oba whispered, "Are they his?" Blessing's eyes welled with tears. Yes, twins. It was as if time paused. In that moment, guilt flooded the older woman's chest. The judgment, the rejection, the coldness. They had pushed away not just love, but life itself. "I want to help," she said. "Please let me." Blessing hesitated. But she was tired, so tired. She nodded. And just like that, the tides began to turn. For the first time in months, hope returned. Not just to Blessing, but, unknowingly, to Desmond too, because fate was already weaving its way back through broken hearts. And the secret of new life was about to break the chains of an old, loveless marriage. Mrs. Oba couldn't sleep that night. The image of Blessing standing alone in that market, belly full with twins, haunted her more than she cared to admit. She had once seen the girl as a threat, an outsider who didn't belong in their perfect world, but now she saw her as a mother, as a woman left to carry Desmond's legacy alone. Early the next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Mrs. Oba made a decision she never thought she would make. She returned to Blessing's apartment. The building was falling apart, the hallway dim, and the air stale with the scent of mildew. When Blessing opened the door, she looked confused, even guarded. But Mrs. Oba didn't ask for permission. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the cramped room. No crib, no proper kitchen, no comfort. "This is no place for Desmond's children," she said quietly. Blessing turned away. "It's all I can afford."
"Not anymore."
With a firmness born from years of commanding boardrooms and hosting dignitaries, Mrs. Oba arranged everything. Within the hour, she had Blessing packing. A driver arrived, a maid was dispatched to the new home. It wasn't just a house. It was one of the Oba family's hidden estates, a private mansion on the quiet edge of the city, far from gossip, far from Desmond, for now. Blessing stood in awe as she entered. Marble floors, spacious rooms, clean linens. For the first time in months, she didn't feel ashamed of needing help. She felt seen, not as a burden, but as a woman carrying something priceless. "Rest," Mrs. Oba told her gently. "Eat well, sleep. You're not alone anymore." And she meant it. Every day she visited. Sometimes she brought books, or food, or small baby clothes she picked out herself. Sometimes she simply sat with Blessing and listened. But one thing she didn't bring was Desmond. She hadn't told him, not yet. She wanted to wait, to make sure Blessing was safe, stable, at peace. She had made so many mistakes already. Rushed to judgment, let pride silence compassion. This time she would not act in haste. She also didn't tell her husband. Mr. Oba remained in the dark, convinced his son's marriage was still the best path for the family legacy. He had no idea that two new lives, their very own blood, were growing under a roof he had unknowingly provided. And Desmond? He sensed something was different about his mother. She smiled more, left the house alone often, seemed lighter. "Where do you go all the time?" he asked once over dinner. "Just visiting an old friend," she replied with a cryptic smile. Desmond didn't push, but he watched. Something was shifting. Behind the marble walls of his father's empire, the truth stirred, and in the quiet halls of a hidden mansion, two tiny heartbeats thumped against the silence. Life was coming, and with it, the beginning of the end. for every lie that had kept them apart. 2 weeks later, the cries of newborns echoed through a private hospital room. Blessing had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The labor had been long and painful, but the moment she held them, everything melted away. Her arms trembled as she cradled them, overwhelmed by the fierce protective love that surged through her. Mrs. Oba stood by her side, tears in her eyes. She had insisted on being there for the birth, holding Blessing's hand, whispering words of strength and comfort. As she looked at the babies, so tiny, so perfect, she realized this was more than redemption. It was destiny correcting its course. She didn't tell Desmond right away. Instead, she came up with a plan. That morning, she returned home with a calm smile and told her son, "I'm going to visit a friend at the hospital today. Why don't you come with me? She's someone I'd like you to meet." Desmond hesitated. He had been wary of his mother's new routines, but curiosity got the better of him. He agreed. The drive was quiet. Mrs. Oba said little, only humming softly, a song he remembered from childhood. When they arrived at the hospital, Desmond followed her through the sterile corridors, confused. "Who is this friend?" he finally asked. She didn't answer. She stopped outside a room and gently pushed the door open. 2 weeks later, the cries of newborns echoed through a private hospital room. Blessing had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The labor had been long and painful, but the moment she held them, everything melted away. Her arms trembled as she cradled them, overwhelmed by the fierce protective love that surged through her. Mrs. Oba stood by her side, tears in her eyes. She had insisted on being there for the birth, holding Blessing's hand, whispering words of strength and comfort. As she looked at the babies, so tiny, so perfect, she realized this was more than redemption. It was destiny correcting its course. She didn't tell Desmond right away. Instead, she came up with a plan. That morning, she returned home with a calm smile and told her son, "I'm going to visit a friend at the hospital today. Why don't you come with me? She's someone I'd like you to meet." Desmond hesitated. He had been wary of his mother's new routines, but curiosity got the better of him. He agreed. The drive was quiet. Mrs. Oba said little, only humming softly, a song he remembered from childhood. When they arrived at the hospital, Desmond followed her through the sterile corridors, confused. "Who is this friend?" he finally asked. She didn't answer. She stopped outside a room and gently pushed the door open. Desmond didn't sleep that night. He sat in the quiet corner of Blessing's hospital room, watching his children sleep. Every breath they took, every tiny twitch of their fingers felt like a miracle he didn't deserve. But now that he had them, he wasn't letting go. By morning, his decision was clear. He was going to confront his father. Not to ask, not to negotiate, but to reclaim his life. That afternoon, Desmond returned to the mansion, not as the obedient son, but as a man with nothing left to lose. He stormed into his father's study without knocking. Mr. Oba looked up from a glass of brandy, startled by the fire in his son's eyes. "I'm done living a life that isn't mine," Desmond said. Mr. Oba narrowed his gaze. "You've been with that girl again, haven't you?" "They're not just that girl anymore," Desmond growled. "She's the mother of my children. Your grandchildren." Silence, then a slow blink of disbelief. "You're lying. I held them in my arms yesterday," Desmond replied. "A boy and a girl. They carry your blood, and you'll never meet them if you think you can control me again." Mr. Oba slammed the glass down. "You think you can just throw everything away for some street girl with babies? I already did," Desmond said coldly, "and it was the best decision I ever made." "Do you realize what you're risking? The company, the legacy? I don't want your empire if it means living like a prisoner." The words sliced through the room. Mrs. Oba had entered quietly during the argument. Now she stepped forward. "Desmond's right," she said, her voice firm. "We tried to build a family on image, on power, and look what it cost us." Mr. Oba turned to her, stunned. "You knew?" "I've known for weeks," she said, "and I've never been more proud of our son." Desmond stepped forward. "I'm leaving, Father, not running away, just choosing differently. And if you ever want to be part of your grandchildren's lives, you'll come to me on my terms." Without waiting for a response, Desmond turned and walked out. He returned to the hospital with a sense of freedom he hadn't felt in years. Blessing was sitting up holding their daughter. When she saw him, her face lit up. "What happened?" she asked. Desmond knelt beside her. "I broke the chains," he said, "and I'm never going back." Blessing leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. The babies stirred gently, as if sensing the peace settling into the room. This time, Desmond wasn't choosing love instead of his life. He was building a life around love, and nothing, not money, not legacy, not even blood, would ever pull them apart again. Peace never comes without a price, and for Desmond it arrived with the quiet before a storm. Just days after taking Blessing and the twins home from the hospital, the doorbell rang. Desmond expected his mother or a delivery, but it was Evelyn. Dressed in black, lips blood red, she stood like a curse reborn. "You lied to me," she said coldly. Desmond stepped outside, closed the door behind him to protect his family. "You think you can walk away like I didn't exist? You were never part of my heart," he answered. She smiled bitterly. "You broke a deal between empires, and my father, he doesn't let go." That night, the phone rang. The family's lawyer delivered the news. Mr. Lambert Even was suing the Oba family for breach of contract, calling for the collapse of key ventures, accusing them of defamation. Desmond felt guilt, not for loving Blessing, but for the destruction left behind. He had only wanted to escape, not to burn everything, but the cost was rising. Days later, Mr. Oba appeared at his door, not furious, but broken. Lines on his face deeper than Desmond remembered. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "Not just about her, about you. I built a kingdom, and lost my son. Now I'm losing the walls too." Then he heard it. Soft baby cries from within the house. "Let me meet them," he asked. Desmond hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, Blessing stood, holding one of the twins. The other slept nearby. Her eyes met Mr. Oba's, not with fear, but calm strength. He stepped in, hesitant, almost breathless. And when he held his granddaughter, she didn't cry. He did. Outside, parked in the shadows, Evelyn watched from a black car. Her jaw clenched, her eyes cold. This wasn't over, not yet. The calm was too perfect. Desmond should have known. For a few brief days, everything felt like it was falling into place. His father had held his grandchild. Blessing was healing. The twins were thriving. The media began whispering about redemption for the Oba family. Some called it progress, others weakness. Desmond didn't care. He had his family. Until the summons arrived. A thick envelope. Legal documents. Evelyn was suing him for emotional damages, defamation, and breach of marital contract. But it wasn't about money. She wanted custody. She claimed moral guardianship as Desmond's legal wife. It was madness, but calculated. A direct hit to his heart. The courtroom became a battlefield. Mr. Oba stormed in, furious. "She's trying to erase our bloodline." Evelyn didn't appear at first, but her lawyers did. Slick, ruthless. They painted Desmond as unstable, a deserter. Blessing was called a manipulator, a seductress. Desmond's fists clenched under the table. Then Evelyn appeared, dressed in white, not for innocence, but for war. "I told you," she hissed as she walked past him. "You don't humiliate me and walk away." But Desmond had come prepared. His mother had documented everything: medical records, baby certificates, witness statements, even footage of Evelyn laughing at charity galas while Desmond raised the twins alone. The judge read the evidence. The gavel fell. Desmond won. Evelyn left the courtroom in silence, but her eyes burned. Back home, Desmond held Blessing close. "It's over," he whispered. But Blessing shook her head. "She's not done. Not until she destroys something." Desmond knew she was right. Because power doesn't fade quietly, it screams before it dies. And Evelyn wasn't planning to go down alone. Days passed in a fragile peace. Desmond finally felt like life was settling. Blessing was healing, the twins were laughing, and his father had embraced the new chapter. Whispers in the press called it redemption. Then the news shattered it all. Desmond Oba under investigation for fraud and corporate espionage. He knew who was behind it. "She forged documents," he said, trembling. Blessing reached out. Then, we don't panic, we fight. But Desmond wasn't alone. To his surprise, Mr. Oba, once obsessed with legacy, held a press conference. And for the first time, he didn't speak as a tycoon, but as a father. "My son walked away from fortune out of integrity. These accusations are false, and I know exactly who is behind this." Cameras flashed. Evelyn's name echoed across headlines. Then came the raid. Investigators tore into her father's company. Trails, signatures, leaked emails. Cornered, Evelyn tried to flee the country. She was arrested at the airport. The image of her in handcuffs went viral, and with it, her power died. Back home, Desmond sat in stunned silence. Blessing placed their daughter in his arms, their son curled against her chest. "It's really over," he said. "Now we start again," Blessing replied, "but on our terms." Desmond declined the boardroom. Instead, he opened a foundation. In her name, 4 single mothers, 4 forgotten families. They moved into a modest home, no marble, no chandeliers, just sunlight, music, and laughter. One evening, Desmond watched Blessing dance barefoot in the kitchen, the twins clapping, and he knew peace wasn't found in empires. It was built in kitchens, and sometimes, to find heaven, you have to walk through hell first.